Good morning. Here we go. Agents facing and bracing for a brutal summer at the border. DHF projects 18,000 illegals cross the border every day coming up. That's more than double the current volume as we say good morning on a Friday. We begin with that bit of news. I'm Bill Hemmer, live here in New York City. Hello, partner.
Good morning. I'm Dana Perino. This is America's Newsroom. It's stunning to think about just how much the Border Patrol says we already can't handle it, and we know that there's not enough judges in order to process. Sure. There's not enough facilities, and you're going to add 18,000 a day. It's a lot. So new video shows the Texas National Guard preparing for what's to come, and you can see them conducting drills in full-on riot gear with shields and batons. So fueling all of this, President Biden's decision to allow a Trump-era border policy to expire about a month from now. That rule allows authorities to expel migrants without hearing their asylum claims. The decision to end the policy is drawing pushback even from Democrats. 5 moderate senators are now backing a Republican bill to keep it in place. So we have Team Fox coverage from Texas. Carl Rove has analysis, but we begin on the border with Bill Melugin, La Jolla, Texas today. Bill, hello.
Bill, good morning to you. Human smuggling continues to be a nonstop problem down here at the border, and we have a few incidents we'd like to show you that were all reported just in the last day. Starting with this, take a look at this. Texas DPS body cam video. They pull over a truck with a gooseneck trailer attached in Jim Hogg County. They see all these wooden crates on the back of it. They're sealed shut, so they start using drills to open them up. If we can pull up these photos right here, this is what they find inside. 21 migrants were literally locked inside of those wooden crates, sealed shut with screws. They had to, again, use drills to open them up. Some of the migrants complained that they couldn't breathe. The driver, a gang member, was later arrested and charged with human smuggling. Then take a look at these photos out of Del Rio sector. 2 separate U-Haul trucks busted with human smuggling incidents. 39 migrants in total locked inside of these U-Hauls. Both drivers arrested. Both were U.S. citizens. Then another human smuggling incident, this one out of Eagle Pass, so we can pull this photo up. A big rig trailer is stopped at a checkpoint outside of Eagle Pass. A K-9 hits on the truck. They break the seal. They open it up. They find 11 illegal immigrants being smuggled inside, lying on pallets. They were all from Guatemala and Mexico. Again, no ventilation. Then these big groups continue to keep crossing. Look at this photo sent to me by a source out here in the RGV last night. This is a group of 198 who crossed in La Grulla last night. We've been reporting these big groups every day now. It's one of the reasons border agents are so overwhelmed out here. Then you mentioned those National Guard drills. This last piece of video, if we can pull this up, right after those drills finished up near Ansel Lewis Bridge in Mission yesterday, as we were packing up to leave, we saw this group of dozens of migrants cross illegally. They were being escorted by one single Border Patrol truck to go be processed. Talk with some of them. Almost all of them were from Nicaragua. And then back out here live as that conversation swirls about what to do with Title 42. You mentioned there's now bipartisan support to keep it in place. Some Republicans are now messaging to the Biden administration, okay, if you don't want to keep Title 42 for COVID-19, keep it for fentanyl, which is now becoming a huge public health crisis. The DEA now warning law enforcement nationwide they need to prepare for mass casualty incidents involving fentanyl because so many people are being exposed to the drug without even knowing it. Wow. I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Bill. Bill Melugin starting our coverage on this Friday. Nice to see you. Thank you, Dana.
Meanwhile, the White House is hitting back at Texas Governor Greg Abbott. This in response to the governor's plan to put illegal immigrants onto buses and drive them to the U.S. Capitol. Here's Jen Psaki.
I think it's pretty clear this is a publicity stunt. His own office admits that a migrant would need to voluntarily be transported, and he can't compel them to because, again, enforcement of our country's immigration laws lies with the federal government, not a state.
Washington, D.C.?
Well, listen, I don't know, but I know that the governor of Texas or any state does not have the legal authority to compel anyone to get on a bus.
Governor Abbott announced the plan yesterday, calling it a response to the president's unwillingness to protect the border.
So the immigration issue expected to have a big impact on the midterms. Carl Rove here with analysis on that. Hey, Carl, good morning to you. I know you got a whiteboard, but here are here's the list of senators. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them are Democrats that oppose dropping Title 42. Call for number 5, guys. And just as a backdrop here, Carl, this was the headline from March 20th. Fauci says U.S. unlikely to see surge from new COVID-19 variant. All right. That's from March 20th. But this headline from yesterday where we are likely to see a surge in the fall. So Fauci's seen it both ways over the past 3 weeks. You think about what his position is. You think about these Democratic senators up for re-election in November are. I think Title 42 arguably could come back yet again over the next several weeks. Your view it is what?
Well, first of all, you put your finger on one of the most important things. The people on the Democratic side who've come out in favor of this are up for election this year, and vulnerable Democrats in battleground states, and they recognize how volatile this is. The president's approval on the handling of immigration last year, in March of last year, was 40%. Today, it is 32%. And if we see 18,000 people a day coming across the border, then we're going to see those numbers sink even lower. I loved it. Jen Psaki said it's the federal government's responsibility to enforce the immigration laws, not the states. So therefore, he can't do it. Well, when is the federal government going to start enforcing the law? The state of Texas is spending millions of dollars every week in order to fill the gaps on the border that the Border Patrol openly says we don't have enough resources, technology, and people to man. I spent the last weekend with the father of one of the National Guardsmen deployed to the border. His son is telling them that every night his squad is out there all night long with night vision goggles and heavily armed, and they take fire from across the river. The Mexican cartels shoot tracers in order to make certain that their appearance is known, and every night they are picking up dozens of illegals, and they're in one very small stretch, maybe a couple of miles long, on the border. And our border with Mexico is hundreds of miles long. So this is a grave crisis for the country, and the nonchalant attitude of the White House, Jen Psaki, as she gets ready to leave for cable TV news, is like, we're in charge, don't worry about it, we got it handled, and they do not have it handled.
Undo a law that's passed by Congress. The two bills were banning Russian energy imports and removing Russia's normalized trade relations status. It passed the Senate 100-0 unanimously, and then it headed over to the House to pass the lower chamber the same day, just about as fast as you could hope for anything to go through Congress, headed to the president's desk. There was far less unanimity, though, on the vote that very same day in the UN General Assembly to kick Russia out of the Human Rights Council. This is over mounting evidence of war crimes and its unjustified invasion of Ukraine. Although 94 nations voted to kick the Kremlin out of the Human Rights Council, 58 countries abstained, including Brazil, Egypt, India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Qatar, and the UAE. 24 countries voted against it, including Belarus, China, North Korea, Iran, Syria, and of course, Russia themselves. The vote followed a surprising NBC report. U.S. officials revealing the administration has tried to deter Putin by releasing intelligence, even if it wasn't always rock solid. For instance, when it came to warnings about possible chemical weapons attacks. An official clarified to Fox, not all intelligence comes with either high or low levels of confidence, but they would never put anything out in the public realm if they didn't have any confidence in it at all.
All right, there's also a big celebration at the White House today for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, despite the COVID outbreak. What do you know?
Yeah, that's right. The White House is moving forward with an event on the South Lawn to celebrate the confirmation vote of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, despite a lot of cases here at the White House. And you'll recall back when President Trump did the same thing with Amy Coney Barrett, President Biden called that a super spreader event. The difference now, the Biden White House says, is vaccines are available. The White House tallied up the hours, or the time rather, that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi spent around the president. It did fall under the CDC threshold, so Biden is not considered a close contact, even after she planted a kiss on his cheek on Wednesday and tested positive yesterday.
It is possible he will test positive for COVID at some point. And we're in a very different place than we were, for example, when they held that event for Justice Barrett, which is to say we have vaccines, we have treatments. The president is vaccinated and double boosted and so, protected from severe COVID.
The White House isn't being quite as stringent, though, with CDC guidance when it comes to the VP. CDC says if you're exposed to COVID, you're supposed to wear a mask around others for 10 full days. Vice President Kamala Harris, though, was spotted in the Senate chamber, maskless at KBJ's confirmation vote in the Senate yesterday. All of this after her communications director, Jamal Simmons, tested positive, and Harris was defined as a close contact, Dana.
All right. Thank you so much, Jackie. We'll see what happens. Hopefully everybody is healthy.
That's right. You know, we parse the language a lot of times right now. I think Jen Psaki's been pretty defiant in her defense of the president and all the COVID outbreak in D.C. But Kate Bedingfield's comment there, it is possible that he could test positive. Intriguing.
Also true.
He got his second booster 9 days ago. We'll see whether or not that's the case.
Third booster, right?
Yeah.
No.
Sorry?
Second booster, yes.
Second booster,
So he's had all the boosters.
Back to Russia quickly. When Russia loses the UN, Wall Street Journal writes this: the practical effect is negligible, but the symbolism counts for something when Russia is barred from a Human Rights Council that includes the likes of Venezuela, Cuba, and China. How's that for friends in the neighborhood, Danny?
Yeah.
Like that?
It was interesting to look at the map that Jackie Heinrich just put up, too. I'm like, what, Bolivia, Brunei, Vietnam. You wonder what they were thinking. But they got well over the 2/3 vote that they needed in order to kick Russia off of the Human Rights Council. It's a long time coming. Good thing that it
Which
did.
in itself is a significant move for the UN. All right, American and Polish troops holding joint military exercise.
Gottheimer is one of those Democrats. He joins us now. Congressman, what is your principal objection to this deal?
Well, I have several objections and deep concerns. As you know, Iran is the leading state sponsor of terror in the region. They've proven time and again that they are not to be trusted, obviously through their military, the IRGC. They've been supporting through their proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Jihad, attacks on the United States, on our bases, on our allies, on Israel. And they've just, I think that they cannot be trusted. And what I'm concerned about is what we're hearing publicly about the direction that these terms are moving in and how that could actually, not just on the terror front, but on the nuclear front, be something that is destabilizing to the region.
And also, I wanted to get your take on this, the fact that Russia is still at the table and that many Russian firms would stand basically to earn billions of dollars in revenue as part of this new deal. And President Biden has been very explicitly calling Vladimir Putin a war criminal. And I think Americans are having a hard time understanding how is Russia still at the table? Why is this a good idea? What do you hear from the administration on that?
Well, that's one of my concerns that we've publicly read, that as part of these negotiations, that Russia will keep the uranium from Iran, right? And Iran over the years keeps enriching their uranium. They've gone from what they wanted was 3.5% to be able to use for energy, for keeping the lights on, to now they're at 60% enrichment when moving their way toward a nuclear weapon. And so if a deal were struck, the idea that's at the table now is that Russia would hold the uranium. So you'd be giving a war criminal, as you said, Putin, to be able to hold that uranium. That seems to me obviously a very concerning development. And so I think overall what we need is a stronger and longer agreement that addresses these issues, that obviously gets Putin out of the equation, that addresses what we're going to do on the terror front, but lifting sanctions and giving billions of dollars to a leading state sponsor of terror, to me, makes no sense, and obviously is concerning for us, for the United States, for our security, and of course for the region.
You were joined by many other Democrats that were raising alarm about this. Several of them also in I guess you would call them swing districts. But to me, I listened to that whole press conference. There's a principal objection here. So when a force like this, a group of Democrats comes together, does the administration listen to you on this?
Well, we've been reaching out to them now for months, and I think they understand our concerns. And what we're trying to say to them is let's rethink how we approach this agreement. None of us want a nuclear Iran, but there's a way to do it. I think none of us trust Iran. So the key is making sure we keep our sanctions strong. But ideas on the table that we've read about, like removing the designation of the IRGC as a foreign terrorist organization, seems to me, given their track record of killing Americans and funding terrorist organizations and proxies, is insane. And as you probably saw, Milley, Joint Chiefs, just this week before the Senate said that delisting Iran, the IRGC, as a foreign terrorist organization is not a smart move. They have clearly proven that they have funded terrorism and have attacked America. Just recently, we've seen the IRGC, as you probably saw, Dana, launch on American consulate, launch weapons right in the area of an American consulate. So we have to protect America. We've got to protect our allies, and of course stand up to terror in the region. And that's what we've been expressing to the administration. And we're hopeful, the 18 of us who've raised concerns about the contours of this agreement and what's been publicly said, and hopefully that they'll hear us on that.
All right, Congressman Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey, thank you.
Thanks, Dana.
23 past, got a Fox News alert now. Horrific attack a bit earlier today in eastern Ukraine. This as Poland and the U.S. hold joint military exercises near the border with Ukraine. This major attack, though, overnight is getting a lot of attention. The warning now, the video you're about to see will be disturbing. At least 39 are dead, dozens more wounded after Russians carried out 2 missile strikes on a crowded train station where women and children were trying to evacuate. Now, that station was used to evacuate. Alexis McAdams is live in southeastern Poland near the site of those drills with Poland. Alexis, good morning to you.
Bill, good morning. I'm here in Nowa Dęba, Poland, which is where the troops have been training throughout the morning. We were there on this area as we saw intensive training exercises between NATO allies of Polish troops and American troops. But the Army, they showed us exactly what they've been planning on doing and how they're preparing and training. This comes as they try to send a very strong message to Moscow and Putin, who's closely watching. Listen. And that's on the ground in Poland there. We were able to witness firsthand essential tactical and fire training with Army troops, including the 82nd Airborne Division, exercising with the 21st Rifle Regiment of Poland. The training included artillery fire and javelins, also known as anti-tank guided missiles, which have been key in Ukraine's fight against Russian attacks that have continued. Now, these are planned NATO training exercises, but man, do they come at a pivotal time here. Poland's military tells us they're working to strengthen the eastern part of Poland, and NATO's eastern flank is a top priority. The training, a major message to Moscow.
We are training together with USA Army Forces. We belong to NATO, so we are good soldiers.
Now, Poland's military tells us today that the United States now has more than 10,000 soldiers stationed here in Poland. Also, the Polish Minister of Defense was there. He had a very strong message that NATO is strong, they're training, and they're ready. Bill?
Message delivered. Thanks, Alexis. Nice to see you near the border. Alexis McAdams. Thanks, Dan.
New York City's new mayor ran on a platform of Miguel Cardona calling out Florida Governor Ron DeSantis over the state's new parental rights law. Cardona says concerns over Florida's controversial public school curriculum are being exaggerated. Mark Meredith is live in Washington with the details. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Dana, good to see you. President Biden's education secretary is only the latest high-profile Democrat to take a swipe at Florida's governor. He's criticizing Ron DeSantis after the governor signed a law banning certain elementary teachers from discussing sexual orientation. Now, the law reads, quote, in terms of this, classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 in a manner that is not age appropriate. Now, critics have been calling this law Don't Say Gay, but supporters, including DeSantis, say it's all about making sure educators focus on curriculum instead of politics. So on Thursday, Secretary Cardona told the Washington Post there's no need for the law.
What it's doing is creating division, creating a problem where one didn't exist. I've been in education for 2 decades. Teachers are not teaching young children information the way it's being exaggerated.
The secretary also says it's possible the Education Department may investigate further. That is, if it receives complaints from students who feel the law is violating their civil rights. This debate also going well beyond Florida. More states, including Louisiana and Ohio, are considering similar measures.
Nowhere in the bill does it mention that you cannot say the word gay. What it says is you have to teach age-appropriate education, period.
Gay rights groups have been slamming these measures as a step backwards, but a variety of polls show Americans are split on the idea. Either way, with more states talking about this, odds are it's going to be an issue, Dana, in this year's midterm elections. Dana?
Well, Mark Meredith, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. In the past month, the Global Red Cross and Red Crescent Network has provided humanitarian aid to more than 750,000 people inside of Ukraine as well as in neighboring countries. The need is tremendous. Jagan Chapagain is Secretary General of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies with us here in New York. And nice to see you from Geneva, Switzerland into New York City, and welcome here. How have you been able to help thus far? Why don't we begin there with this long process?
I think this has been quite challenging in the beginning because in many ways the extent of the crisis was not fully anticipated. It came quick, it moved very quick, and hundreds of thousands of people started leaving the country, and there was a massive damage on the infrastructure inside the country. So we had to ramp up our work very, very quickly. Thankfully, we had more than 3,000 volunteers in Ukraine already in the country before the conflict started. And those volunteers are mobilized from very early on, primarily to support the first aid, training the first aid, but also starting to provide the relief supplies. And as days passed, we have now established a proper supply chain to get the support inside Ukraine, but also working with our local Red Cross in the neighboring countries. So it's been a very massive scale up in a very short period.
And it could get bigger too, as you know.
Absolutely.
We'll see.
One of the things that you help provide is mental health support. Yeah. And I think people are very interested in that because we talk to some of the refugees. We see what it's like to have left. Sometimes people said that they thought they grabbed all of their belongings, but they forgot their documents. So now they're in a situation where they don't have anything to prove who they are or where they were, and they've left their loved ones behind, or maybe they lost a loved one in the killings. Yeah. So the mental health support, are there volunteers for that? How do you get that taken care of, that part?
Actually, the last number of years, the mental health has been on a very high on our priority. And the COVID-19 actually showed that the mental health was one of the biggest impact of the COVID-19. So we had been scaling up our work. We have a global center in Copenhagen where we have the experts. They provide the expertise around the world. So because of the COVID-19 response, we had been investing on training the mental health volunteers inside Ukraine, but also in the neighboring countries. And what you described is absolutely right. People are traumatized. There have been separation in the families. They have lost loved ones, or sometimes relatives, the family members, and the sense of uncertainty that what happens tomorrow and in a week or a month's time is very, very heavy on people's mental health. So this has been one of our top priorities, and we'll continue to invest on this area of support.
Well, we have 5 million refugees now. That number could double. Yeah. It could triple, unfortunately. I saw a note here that came from your organization. They say even wars have rules. Well, what we saw earlier today with a missile strike on women and children who are getting ready to board a train and get out of eastern Ukraine is that's merciless. As an organization, can you communicate to the Russians what you're trying to do to help innocents, to make sure that what we saw earlier today can be limited or at least not happen?
You know, from the very beginning of the crisis, from the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, we have been advocating that the international humanitarian law, the Geneva Conventions, have to be respected by all sides in the conflict. And the international humanitarian law is not optional. This must be respected. Of course, as we have seen now here in Ukraine, but also in other conflicts, the nature of the conflict are in many ways changing, and a lot of times civilians have become the target, civilian infrastructure have become the target, and this must not be acceptable anywhere in the world. From our point of view, the Red Cross Red Crescent position very much is that civilians must be protected, international humanitarian law must be upheld, and for us to be able to support everybody affected by the conflict, we have to practice neutrality and impartiality.
But it seems like Putin's army sometimes doesn't respect exactly what you're saying. When some of these towns are surrounded, people can't get out.
We should point out, like, you do great work. Our viewers have done great work. $13 million has been raised so far by all of you, and we thank you for that because, as you can see, as Shakan is explaining to us, it goes to great work. And important work, and we'll continue to support you. Thank you so much.
Our viewers are quite amazing.
But they have done an incredible job, and I must say, through you, I want to thank them. And their contribution is saving lives. And I really want to thank them for their generosity. And this generosity is needed because, as you said, the suffering, unfortunately, will continue for months to come.
Well, we thank them every day, and good luck to you.
You have a big and gentle heart. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, the president's younger sister, Valerie, looking to cash in on the family name, what she's doing that is raising new ethics concerns for the White House. Plus, President Biden campaigned as an everyman, but a new poll shows a record high find that image is more myth than reality. That's the starting point for our panel. Kellyanne Conway and Mark Penn. They're next.
And Joe at a PA, but a brand new poll casting doubt on that image. About half of voters apparently don't think the president cares about the average American. That's a record high, but what would explain that? The numbers folks are with us now. Mark Penn, former Clinton pollster and advisor, and Kellyanne Conway, former Trump campaign manager. And good morning to both of you. Wow. Okay, Mark, you dive into these numbers. You try and see patterns and try and figure it out. How would you explain that number about Americans thinking that the president doesn't care about them?
Well, I think the president has lost one of his key attributes, which was always likability. Whether people favored his policies or not, he did have this image of being a kind of a likable Uncle Joe, you know, ice cream Joe, kind of friendly. And I think he's lost that. I think it's been replaced by a kind of a sterner, angrier figure who can now generate numbers that like this.
Wow, interesting. Kellyanne, I don't know if you agree with Mark, but if so, what would explain that? Or what do you see, or do you see something different?
I do agree. I mean, 30 years after Bill Clinton said to America, I feel your pain, many Americans think Biden is causing their pain. Pain at the pump, pain in the grocery store, pain at the southern border. And there's this feeling of insecurity and uncertainty. And when you lay that over the cratering of his personal attributes, including among independents and increasingly among suburban women, he's in trouble. Why? Because even when presidents have run into trouble domestically or internationally, many of them have been able to rely upon a whole coterie of personal attributes as their strength. So right now in everybody's polling, a majority of Americans don't think the following apply to Joe Biden. Cares about people like me, has a plan, can unify the country, inspires people. And those are the kinds of attributes that presidents have been able to rest upon when other crises were all around them. I think the White House has an increasing problem that some people think about some issues they're lying, and on other issues they're not even trying. If you want the public to have faith in you as a president, you must at least make them feel that you are listening to them. Voters follow you if they're listening to them, but I think heading into this fall particularly, the Biden Democrats have a problem with suburban women who are very worried about public safety, a rise in crime, insecurity, chaos, and unaffordability. And these personal attributes cratering don't help with that.
Okay, so with that, call for number 3, guys, takes us right to the Gallup poll. When asked, are you concerned about crime? Great deal, a fair amount. Kellyanne, you're right about that because the number's at 80%. You see in a moment here, call for 3, guys, 80% on the crime issue.
No, it's huge. It's I know Mark will jump in here. We saw these levels in 1994, ironically, right before the contract with America was formed. And I was a baby pollster then, trying to help Newt Gingrich and Frank Luntz and Haley Barbour and others. But that contract with America came out on September 27th, 1994. What's happening now is this is all just happening early. And crime was a big issue that year along with the economy. And you see it again. And people know that there's a bright line distinction between the two parties. You had one party say defund the police all through 2020. You have a vice president who were not a good idea necessarily. And you just have this wrapped insecurity in the suburbs, rural and urban areas that things are out of control. And if people feel like they don't have control and you're not helping to bring it into control, they'll punish you. We have a lot of runaway DAs and people know which party they're in.
Yeah, I think you make an argument whether it's crime or the border, maybe both of those. Mark, chew on this for a second here. They also asked the question, if the election were held today, who do you want to control power? In the House, it was Republicans 47-43. In the Senate, it was Republicans 48-44. I think based on history, if Republicans even have an edge on that, it's been a blowout come election time. How do you view it?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. This question, even when it's dead even, usually for reasons we've never figured out, polls 3 or 4 points, for the Democrats. If you notice, the Republicans don't get over 50%. So that is an important watermark here in terms of how much this election will really swing things. But, look, all pollsters agree right now. The president's underwater, inflation, crime, immigration. These are core issues. Handling foreign affairs. Look, I think the president took a big hit on the way he handled Afghanistan. Does he seem compassionate to people now? You look at the war crimes being committed. Is he seen as the kind of president who can rally leadership around something like that? Those are the open questions. Those are the opportunities that he has. as president. So far, he hasn't really taken them, despite, I think, clear opportunities to change energy policy, to change immigration policy, to appoint a more moderate Supreme Court. He hasn't made those direction. Time is running out for that. Mostly, Democrats seem to pivot after a bad election.
Yeah,
this
interesting
is really an opportunity to pivot
Mark,
before
he's got 7 months to change this. I mean, has the ship sailed, or do you sense a redirection on any of this?
Well, you know, if you don't change where the sails are going and you keep sailing in the same direction, they keep doubling down. Everything you see is a doubling down of their current strategy. You can see they're out appealing even more so to minority and black voters, whom they have almost 90% of, rather than pitching to the swing voters. And it's the swing voters in the